difficult times the world is going through, people, professions, and patience. May the Almighty shower His grace and blessings on the world. Thank you. I'm happy to preside over today's function since the President is handed over the mantle to me. Chief guest of the day, Professor Niharika Vora, Vice Chancellor, Delhi Skill and Entrepreneurship University, Dr. Shalini Warrior, Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer, Federal Bank, Dr. Shailija Menon, Director, Tattva Center of Learning, Girinagar, and members of Women's Forum, Management Committee members, past presidents, esteemed members of KMA, distinguished guests, students. I'm hoping that students also will join. Welcome to one and all. We, KMA, has privileged to serve our members with outstanding programs for the past 64 years. Every year, it is getting better and better. This year, no exception. The other side of pandemic is a technological marvel, and the main advantage is getting awesome speakers from anywhere in the world. Of course, we miss personal connect, which no money can buy. This year, KMA organized maximum programs compared to previous years. For example, the Women's Forum programs. I think the number of programs we conducted this year were much more than previous years. This is the 5th program in succession. First program was a panel discussion, glass ceiling for women leaders, myth or reality. Second one, KMA masterclass, digital marketing. Third one, conversation, make your money work for you. Financial planning made easy. And the fourth one was a conversation, continuous learning and staying agile. We had extremely experienced experts and renowned speakers handled every session. Today's topic is women directors, how to get past tokenism. Government of India came up with the concept of women directors in the act known as Companies Act 2013. In this act, the government added an ordinance and made it mandatory to appoint a woman director in the board of directors of companies meeting specific criteria. Our chief guest will be giving us an insight into the subject, which will be pertinent to all of us. Professor Vora is one of the India's leading management gurus. She is currently the Vice Chancellor of the Delhi Skill and Entrepreneurship University, as well as the Director of Innovation and Incubation in Entrepreneurship Center at IIM Ahmedabad. We have a very hearty welcome to you, ma'am. We have a brilliant management committee member and a coordinator of Women's Forum, Ms. Shalini Warrior, Executive Director, Chief Operating Officer, and Head Business Retail, Federal Bank. Now, I invite you, Madam Shalini, to introduce the topic and take this forward. Over to you, Shalini, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Indeed, a pleasure to come and spend some time with the members of the Kerala Management Association on this occasion. Thank you very much for all of you for logging in on this evening. Let me first of all say a big thank you to Professor Vora. She had absolutely no hesitation in accepting my request to come and do this session. It was a virtually single, kind of line in response to my email. So thank you very much for that. The topic we chose was, a little contentious, and I presume I can add to the fact that I was party to the choice of the topic. Being a woman director myself on a board of a listed company, a company that prides itself on the fact that our chair, Mrs. Koshi, is a lady. I have one more lady member, independent member on the board, who's a seasoned banker, and the board of Federal Bank has always had two women directors, independent, and I'm an executive director. Being part of this August company, I do think, we are far beyond tokenism. However, having said that, and having read some of the research that Professor Vora has done, and she'll take us through it, I think there is still an element of tokenism out there. And I think the research will show us whether how much of it is true, how much of it is not true, and more importantly, what do we need to do to go beyond this? What do we need to do to make sure that the voice of women on the board is respected and is actually welcomed? And there are two parts to it, as I see. The organization has to do a lot of things, and women themselves have to do a lot of things. So through the course of the next 45 minutes, Professor Vora is going to enthrall us with the results of her research into the subject, and give us her insights into the kind of research she's done on the subject. And then we'll obviously have an opportunity for a chat with some questions, etc. So Shailaja has, who's a fellow member of with me on the Women's Forum, has very kindly agreed to do the introductions, the questions, and the summary. So Shailaja, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to keep my video off because my bandwidth is low. Please excuse me. Good evening, Professor Niharika, the speaker of the evening, Ms. Shalini Varia, Senior Vice President, Ms. Nirmala Lilly, members of the KMA and Women's Forum, ladies and gentlemen. We are extremely fortunate to have with us this evening Professor Niharika Vora, one of India's leading experts in behavioral science. Currently, the Vice Chancellor of the Delhi Skills and Entrepreneurship University, she has had an illustrious career at India's top management school, IIM Ahmedabad. She has served there for more than 21 years as professor in organizational behavior and was involved in the Center for Innovation and Incubation in Entrepreneurship, a center which she continues to head now. She is an educator par excellence, a corporate consultant, a mentor, an author, and an independent director. Her work is typified by rigorous research and backed by data, as seen in her over 70 peer-reviewed research papers in international and national journals. She has been the chairperson of IIM Ahmedabad's doctoral fellow program and has guided 12 PhD students. She is an editor of the Vikat Journal as well as on the board of other journals and author of 3 books. Not surprisingly, she has won the Best Instructor Award. She is an academic advisor to several educational institutes and now is poised to take the Delhi Skills University to a great height by equipping youngsters with the necessary skills for the contemporary world. We can have no better person than Professor Niharika to speak on this important issue of women directors. She brings enormous knowledge and experience to that role. Professor, I welcome you today to this function. The floor, or rather the screen, is yours. Thank you.
I think you need to unmute first.
Yes, I do. So thank you very much for the lovely introduction. I feel really honored to be part of this group of very, very committed individuals who are wanting to spend the time thinking about something that is so important for all of us. So thank you, Shalini, for inviting, and thank you, Shailaja, for the lovely introduction. And thank you everyone at Kerala Management Association for putting this together. I'm going to actually spend some time talking about a piece of research that I did for the last, I did it over about 1.5 years. You might at the end of the day think, what was there to research for 1.5 years on a topic like this and with the kind of results you find, but to actually make a statement that whether a mandate has worked or not, or whether what the mandate has meant for the industry and for the women and all of that, I think we needed to go beyond opinions and anecdotal data to be actually able to say how to take this forward. So my research was to actually look at that, and I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation to quickly take you through the research. And as I take you through the research, I will share some of my own insights from the research and from my own work in talking to a number of women board members, and also having served on boards myself. So I'll take all three and put together some of this as I talk about it. And I'll be very happy to take questions at the end of the conversation. And I will try to do this in 30 minutes so that we have some time for a conversation. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and yes. And so the okay, this let's see. I hope my bandwidth remains okay, and if it does not, then I will actually switch off my video. Until then, I will do this. So the study itself was motivated and supported by Mr. Arun Duggal, who is a co-founder of the FICCI Women on Corporate Boards Mentorship Program and FICCI itself. So he was the person who said, look, we have been, the mandate is on, we've been running this mentorship program, and therefore we'd like to see what impact all of this has had. That was the initial question that was given to me. And of course, as academicians, we never just follow the question that somebody gives us. We want to look at the bigger picture, and that's what my study ended up doing. I wanted to look up the entire bigger picture. Some of you might remember this, that in 2003, about 18 years ago, several countries said that, it's just not okay for us to complain about the fact that there are no women on boards, or there are very few women on boards. If we really want boards to women on boards, then we will need to have mandates. Of course, it's an age-old debate whether, when I put a mandate for somebody, am I in a way declaring them as weaker? Or is there something else that is happening in this entire process? But anyway, the country said, look, we needed to have a mandate. And let me just show to you what the mandate did. Spain in 2007 said we will have a mandate of 40% mandate, and today they have 23.6% women who are on boards. France has 44.2%, 40% mandate was there, is what they had said. Italy 31.1, they had said 30. Netherlands said 30%, they had 18.7. And you can look at this at the graph, and you can possibly say that in 10 years' time, with the introduction of the mandate, the number of women on boards has definitely gone up, right? That's one thing across the world. Here are some other interesting studies. Here, these are the countries which did not put a mandate, but they said that disclosure was needed, which means monitoring of the number of women on the boards became a matter for the likes of SEBI in different countries. Australia, United Kingdom, Canada, United States, Turkey, and Japan all saw an increase, other than Turkey, which saw a very small increase, all saw an increase just when we said you needed to disclose the number of women you had on the board. So whether it was voluntary or it was involuntary, when there was greater monitoring of the number of women on boards, we find that the representation of women on boards increased. just to make the counterpart, here are the counter argument. Here are the countries which had no mandate or disclosure requirements, and no country has more than 14.9. Actually, the numbers are in the pre-2008 numbers of the countries that decided to do a mandate. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you don't have a mandate and you hope that over time there is going to be more women who get represented, that argument doesn't seem to be working in any of the countries which don't have a mandate or disclosure or voluntary monitoring of this. So when the corporates don't seem to have an incentive to increase representation of women on boards, they also don't seem to have increasing the number of women on boards. So the point we are saying is that women on boards, while we represent 50% of the population across the world, we don't seem to be represented equally if nobody shines a lens on it. If you don't shine a lens on it, even the most developed countries like Japan had 0.9% women on the boards. India was no different. They also said that we will have a mandate, but they were very shy in putting the mandate, and they said at least one woman director on its board. That is in April 2015. And in April 2019, they said at least in the top 500 NSE listed companies, you had to have one independent women director by April 2019. And as you might be aware, that most companies did comply with it. And what it did was, it ended up, I will come back to this. Where is my list? Yeah. So this is the number of no, this is not what this is what I want to do. 73% of the companies meet their mandate. 73% of the companies have one woman director. What Shalini mentioned as her company having the number of directors and a woman chairman is almost an exception, right? There are only, if you notice, 1% companies which have more than 3 women directors. Yeah, and if I compare this to the number of companies that have one male director, that number becomes even more ludicrous. There is almost, if I remember it correctly from my data, there's almost no company which has only one male director. While there are 73% companies, 1,311 companies, which actually have only one woman director. Yeah, so the mandate has done well, but we have just met the mandate, is what I'm going to say. So I'm coming back to what we did. So what we did was we wanted to analyze the regulatory mandates. What was the impact of it? We wanted to describe what kind of experience the women had when they were in the boards. Did they get compensated the same? What kind of patterns of recruitment? How were they recruited, and whether they were related to the family, and so on and so forth. And also to understand the experiences, expectations, and challenges of women board directors in India's public firms. What we did was we actually did the archival. We looked at the PRIME database, and we looked at the MCA database, which is completely public. And we looked at everything about the women directors. What was their age? What was their educational qualification? When did they join? When did they leave? What kind of salaries what kind of compensation did they get? What kind of committees were they part of? And so on and so forth. So we looked at the entire data that was in the public domain about women directors. And we also looked at survey data. We created a primary survey and we sent it to all the women directors. And just as happens in most research, only 192 women actually responded to us after several reminders that they had to send us the mail. And in the 192 women who surveyed, 108 were independent directors. And these were some of the questions we had asked them in the survey as well. What kind of challenges did they face? How were they appointed? What were their motivation to join the board? Were they ready to join a community of women or men to become better board members? What was their expectation versus what was the reality that they had? And what were some of the challenges that they faced in trying to be a woman director? So this was part of the main data. And of course, we looked at all of the secondary data. And as you can see, we looked at 1,994 NSE listed companies. And we sometimes we looked at the data of men as board of directors for comparison, because if you just say that women are 54 years old, it doesn't mean anything unless we compare it with the number of men who are also what the age of the men is. So here are some data on the quantitative findings. Women are not less or more qualified than men. In fact, 51% of the women hold a master's degree. When the first time the mandate was announced, people said that the companies will bring in really poor women, poor in the sense of poorly educated, poorly placed women to become a board of members of the board, because that would be the way they would bypass the regulation, which is not really true from this data. Also, 50 women there could be many reasons for it, but women were at least 10 years younger than men. And that was interesting. What was also interesting was that there was a which I haven't put a graph to show it to you, but there were at least 20 companies which had women who were less than 25 years of age. And these women were independent directors. So I was really curious, what were these women qualified as? Why were they there? And were there as many younger men who were also on the board of directors? And what you would be surprised with is that there were about 12 men who were less than 25 and were on the board of directors. And those 12 men who were on the board of directors and were less than 25 were all members of the family. So they were being groomed to be part of the company. Out of the 20 plus women who were less than 25, only 4 were members of the family, 16 were simply out of a bachelor's degree, and they were independent board of directors. Now that is really something that gives us a clue that to some extent, here was a way in which companies were skirting the mandate. To be a director of a company is an act of responsibility. You need some amount of experience and wisdom to be able to actually have conversations and make a difference in a board. And if you're 24 years old, right out of college, you have just been put to manage the mandate, just to say that we have filled the mandate. So there are some companies, but the number is there that women are younger. And if you see, even in this data, there are younger women who are joining the board. The oldest man who was on the board was 92 years. The oldest woman who was on the board was 78 years. So there's a huge difference in terms of, how long do people stay on the board. Also, very interestingly, most 54% of the women directors were recruited through professional and personal networks. Why this is of significance is that while boards do want people who they know and not an unknown quantity, but when a large portion of it is done through personal networks, what it also indicates is that a large number of the more professional women possibly never get seen or selected into this. And only 17% of the women were actually selected through specialized search firms via applications and so on and so forth, from the mentoring work, from the mentoring network that Arun Dugal had set up at FICCI as soon as the mandate was organized. People also were very scared that organizations would put in a lot of women as non-independent women directors, because that would be one way to get rid of it. We didn't really find evidence for it. There are actually, in fact, the mandate tells people, of April 2019 says that you should have at least one independent women director, and that has definitely affected the higher number of women independent directors. But we also did an age analysis of that, and we didn't find that women were actually, that there was a possibility of having more women as non-independent directors. So that was interesting for us to look at. Okay, this I've already shown you. Here is another interesting piece of data. There has been an inorganic growth of women post the mandate. But what is interesting here is, again, that until about 2013, we had only 62 women who were appointed. On an average, we had about 50 women who were being appointed as directors of boards. Of course, the mandate came, there was a steep rise for 497. 2015 happened, new appointments did not have as many women as they had, as when the mandate was announced or was enforced. So there was a steep dip in the number of women who got appointed. And only in 2019, again, we see a rise because of the new regulation that every company had to have at least one independent women director. So if you see again, from May 18 to April 19 again, they went on doing whatever they did, and only in February, March, and April again did we see a spike in the number of women got appointed just to meet the mandate. Again, I think if you've had as many years of experience of women, in 2015, women were an unknown commodity on many boards. You've had the experience. Rather than getting more women on boards, we just saw it as a compliance issue, did it, and moved on. So that was one of the interesting findings. We would also expect, and again, people said that, with the coming of the mandates, in fact, women would get, the same women would get onto the boards. If the same women would get onto the boards, there would be greater, the stretch of the women on boards would be higher than the stretch of women of men on boards. We didn't find any data for it again. Again, we found that except for the independent board positions, and except for the top 50 NSE companies, listed companies, we did find a little bit of the phenomena of the golden sari or the golden skirt. That is the same woman who became part of many boards. In fact, there were about 30 women who in the top 100 companies served on 3.4 boards or something like that on an average. But in the average number of boards on which women served is less than one. Right. So it, in fact, we didn't see the stretch. So this whole argument that the same women would get put wasn't there. Fewer women will get used across all companies wasn't there. In fact, which is a good thing for us, because that means the companies have actually gone out and looked for a larger set of women. However, we did a little bit of more in-depth into the women who got into more than one company. Interestingly, the women who got into more than one company were either hired on the day before the mandate was to come into effect, or they got appointed to two boards on the same day, or in many cases, the women who got appointed to more than one company were also in somehow related to the people on the board. And typically, while they met the independent board criteria, they were also either of the same community. So the Sindhis often will have more Sindhi women on the board. The Parsis will have Parsis. The Marwadis will have Marwadis, and so on and so forth. So there is a community bias, or there is a friendship bias that is much more difficult to tease out, but you can see that. So we did see that there is a, as I already said, I've already explained this to you, so I'll go on. This is another very interesting piece of data. So while we have the independent women directors, we also looked at the board roles that were played by the non-independent board women directors. The non-executive director is an important piece here, because this is the women who have come from the cadres and now are on the top. So this is maybe the HR head, maybe the finance CEO, maybe the legal head, maybe the company secretary. So if you can see, that number is quite small, 258 women. And there are only 106 professional women directors. And if you look at the family promoter director a breakup, again, the women who were part of the family, interestingly, 241 actually had a functional responsibility in the company, and almost the same number had no functional responsibility in the company. They just were non-executive promoter directors. But if you see, out of the 1,700 women who are directors, 273 women having no formal role does mean that while yes, family members were made part of the companies, but it wasn't a very large number, right? So it's an interesting data point for us to look at. Again, very quickly, and I know I am taking a lot of time, but I'm going to cut this short and just say that if you look at the number of women who are chairs on various committees, audit has the smallest number, right? Stakeholders grievance committee has a next larger number, and CSR and business responsibility has the largest number. So if you were to order some of the critical committees of a board, and you were to see who is on a board, who is not only on a committee but also chairing, while women are on the audit committees, only 6% of the women actually chair audit committees, and only 11% of the companies women actually chair CSR, business responsibility and sustainable development. And if you were to see this, and this number is actually lower than the probability at which they could have been chairs. So if we were to take the argument there are fewer women, so fewer women would be chairs. So what we did was we calculated the probability based on the number of women who are on the boards, and you can see that for all of them that number is actually the probability is much higher than the number that the women are actually there on that. So less than 8% of board women lead as chairpersons of committees, whereas when compared to 16.8% women who are present on boards. So it isn't all hunky-dory. Women are not getting the best places. I would love for you to look at this a little bit. We looked at the MCA website, and we looked at why women left boards. And what is most fascinating is that here are senior experienced women who are saying that they are leaving boards for personal reasons and due to preoccupation. And why I'm putting these out is because these numbers are much higher than that of men. Men only leave boards for personal reasons and preoccupation at 7 and 8%. Women leave it for 14 and 22%. I think there is something for us as investigators to look into it. Maybe they join boards because to fill the mandate, and then they later leave to also please somebody else. One. Secondly, maybe the experience of being on the board as one single woman is so unpalatable that they don't continue their being on board. Also, very, very interestingly, while the commission that you get for being on the board is not any different, the compensation that men and women do make on the board is very different. So women make only 36.8 lakhs and men on an average make 87.3 lakhs from their board engagements. So it's 58% less as compared to men directors. And again, we looked at the breakup, lesser commissions and share units for women as directors as compared to men as directors. So again, while they are in the board, they don't get treated equally. So now time for us to look at some of the insights and experiences. We asked people, did your expectations get met? The expectations for women that got met were they got to learn better, there was a broadening of perspectives, and there was learning and growth. These were their expectations they got. What were their unmet expectations? Not surprisingly, even though they were part of the board, they did not gain recognition, they did not have increased visibility, and they did not get the remuneration expectations were not met. We asked them what their challenges were. A lot of the women spoke about the onerous regulatory requirements and heavy liabilities, which I think would be similar for men as well. They also saw that they had no opportunity to drive or oversee key company decisions. So they seemed to feel like they were puppets. And in the board, there was very limited time that was spent to understand companies' operational issues, and yet they were supposed to be making decisions for the company. And that's something they did not like. So what would be the way forward? And then once I spell these out, we will take some time and we'll look at some of the questions. My sense is there is no dearth of qualified women to serve on boards. We have already 1,600 women who are serving on boards. We have 1,900 listed companies. Why we can possibly very easily go to a 30% mandate, because we recognize that without a mandate, you will not get more women on the board. A lone woman on the board is often invisible or hypervisible and struggles to contribute. And this is a finding that has been found again and again for not just on boards, but in schools, in committees and all of that. So you need a critical number for women to be able to contribute fully. So if you have one woman on the board, she's going to be either hyper visible, everybody's going to look at her and therefore make it difficult for her to perform, or she's just going to be invisible because she's too few in the, her voice is too few in the entire board. In fact, one of the boards that I was serving on, we were looking for another board member because one of our board members was retiring, and I suggested a woman's name, and somebody in the board said, but we already have one woman on board. Yeah, that's how they would, and I was like, no, we look for a woman because she's good, not because you have to fill a mandate. I think there should be some checks and balances around age and experience. You can't have a 24-year-old just passed out of an MBA college or a BBA college to be on a board just because you want to skirt the mandate. Boards also need to be more mindful of inclusion processes and group dynamics. From some of the challenges that we heard from the women boards, they felt that sometimes they were such a minority that their point of view was simply not listened to. And sometimes there was a fairly tight-knit old boys network that was already present there, and it was very difficult to get into it. My experience of being on boards, which are all male except me, is that while I'm at the meeting, I don't find myself at a disadvantage. But the moment the meeting gets over, or before and after the meeting, I find myself very difficult to actually penetrate the old boys network. And a lot of the conversations that are important for the board actually happen there. And I also think that there are going to be times when there are challenging situations in the board. And this is not just for women, but there have to be mechanisms for counseling and support, because there's always this whole thing of what happens in the board is confidential. But sometimes you need to get a different point of view to be able to substantiate what you're thinking. So the necessity of an ombudsperson, the necessity of a small group of people who you can talk to when you are faced with difficult situations, I think would really help both men and women to perform better. So I will stop here. This is some of the people who helped us do this research. It was not just one person, and I'm right now very happy to take questions. I will stop share so that I can see some of you and also look at some of the questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the brilliant wake-up call, I think, to corporate India.
Yeah.
Really, it's to shake everybody this. And it is time we move beyond just that mere tokenism. So I know there are lots and lots of questions.
Madam, wake up call for corporates as well as for capable women, right?
Men, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So there are a lot of questions.
Yes.
So I'll club some together.
Yes, please.
Two people actually were talking about how women directors are they derived more from family networks and connections. So whether they're daughters or daughters-in-law, whether target respondents became directors on the board virtue of family connection, or how many belong to non-family networks. That is one question.
Actually, our study did so. Other than if you remember the file, the graph that I showed you, where I showed that there were about 600 women, not 600 actually. About 500 women who are actually part of family. But if you look at the number of men who are part of family, that number is much larger. So I don't think it is because they were part of, so yes, of course, there are family-run businesses that induct men and women who are part of the family as board members, but I don't think that was a very high number as was feared by a lot of people when the mandates were brought in.
Yeah. Another question was about whether you have any studies correlating profitability and value creation with gender diversity? And whether there's any industry-based study, are there more women directors in service industries compared to manufacturing industries?
Yes, that's a good question. We found, no, I mean, these numbers were not very, very different, but there was a preponderance of more women in media and service as compared to science and manufacturing kind of businesses. There definitely we found that. And what was the other question that you said?
Profitability and value creation with gender diversity.
I personally don't even want to make that argument. I say when we are 50% of the population, we just have the right to be there for 50%. Why should I have to make an argument to you that I will bring more profitability? Bring the best women, bring the best men, and they should be 50-50 represented. That's all. I don't even want to make that argument. Yeah.
Okay. Another one is, did women leave because they didn't have a voice at the board? I mean, you said personal reasons, or what was this a reason?
Did women leave because they didn't have, when you ask women, they don't say it. Yeah. People say, well, I left because of personal reasons, but there is a higher number of women who are leaving because of preoccupation and personal reasons. This is in fact politely saying, I don't think I matter. So I would better use my time in something else. You're not paying me better. You're not valuing me in this entire process. Yeah. And so, why should I? I mean, it is a lot of legal responsibility to be part of a board. If you make a mistake, I'm going to be held responsible for it. And if it isn't worth my time and effort, I'm sure I have more interesting things to do with my life. Yeah. Right. So the point is that, yes, nobody really tells you that I didn't have a voice. But, if you look at the data a little more closely, yes, there is going to be lesser voice just by the fact that you have one woman as your majority number. How do I make my voice known when I'm one? I give you an example from something that is very different. I run a program for women leaders. And in one of my program on women leaders, I had a tall black African woman who was part of the program, right? We were all Indians, and this one for some reason had heard about it, and she traveled all the way from Africa to be part of the program. She wore traditional clothes, like she wore this really nice, bright traditional clothes. 4 days into the program, we realized that we had completely invisibilized her. Oh. Right, because she was a minority. She was different. She had a language issue. She was surely visible physically, but other than that, we hadn't heard a single thing from her. We had not encouraged her to speak. And it was a great lesson as a facilitator and a teacher of the program that even the best of us, with the best of our intentions, we're doing an all women leaders program, we still marginalize that one person who was by herself from a different country, different nationality, different way of everything. So what I'm trying to share is that there is a scientific argument around a critical number. You need a critical number for that group to have its presence felt. And the same thing would be for women, that the same thing would be for people of color, the same thing would be for any of this.
Okay. So the mandate should now have 3 or more now. We should
30%. I think we should we should not be shy. We should just make it.
So there's another question. Why is there a hesitancy to empower women in larger numbers in India, despite women being prime minister and a president in the country?
We can't take this argument. Well, we can't answer this question without also correlating it with the extent of the depth of patriarchy and the gender gap in our country. March 2021 study puts us among the lowest countries in terms of gender gap. So we have the highest gender gap in the world. Saudi Arabia is above us, unfortunately. Yes. So, and we are the only country in the world where the participation of women in the workforce is falling. Yeah. So it's not, I don't think we can, so there is something that we are not addressing. We're not visibilizing, and we aren't talking about it. And therefore, I think the hesitancy comes from more deeper sociological patterns that exist. And I think we also have to talk about them and not shy away from them.
Okay. So what are the factors for that fall, though? We should be doing better now. 70 odd years of independence. That's so strange.
Yes.
Really strange.
We should be doing better, but we aren't. We really aren't. And I think we've not looked at it we don't look at it seriously enough. Like, how many newspapers have actually even carried a study, carried a sense of exclamation as to, wow, we are less than, our gender gap has increased, we are worse off, right? There is no conversation in the national news about it. In fact, we did a little study to look at, you were better off as a little girl in terms of school education in Nepal, Bangladesh, and Pakistan than in India. Yeah, not flattering to us, but that's a reality. And I think we have to start calling these out and make this different for all of us. I'm not saying we are a terrible country and all of that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that we need to look at some of these things a little more deeply.
Shocking, really shocking. There's a question by...
Sorry, Shailaja, if I may come in on that point. I think it's a question of, I don't think we hold a mirror to ourselves enough.
Absolutely.
We don't do enough
Absolutely.
of it. Media is consumed with a whole host of other things, and we ourselves don't hold a kind of, so that's really why this gender gap is widening, and it seems to have become worse over the last couple of years. And the pandemic has made things, because women have lost more jobs during the pandemic than men have. And I think it's deep-rooted patriarchy. It's taking a lot of effort to get a thing, Typically, women end up being the second breadwinner in the family. So the corporate also looks at it saying, oh, she's anyway a second breadwinner, so maybe the family will be okay if I let her off,
And so thank you very much, and very well said, Shalini, that we don't hold the mirror to ourselves.
Yeah.
Very well said.
So that's a learning we need to take. One more question. Is there some more time?
Yeah, one more question.
Okay.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So there was from Lali. Why do women directors hold low-profile grievances, positions? I mean, like CSR or grievance cells and things like that.
Yeah, I think I had a follow-on, same kind of a question.
Yes.
So I think the 6% on the audit committee, 2% of the chair of the RMC. I mean, in a bank and in most places, an RMC and an audit committee are by far the most, difficult committees and the toughest ones. I'm not saying the others are not important. It's just that the responsibility on these two tend to be the highest. So the statistics were really alarming, 2.2% and 6%. I made a note of that. So I think it's linked to the same question that Lali was asking.
Right. My sense is that at least on the number of the 4 boards that I have worked on, I don't get a choice of which committees I become part of. I'm told you're part of this. And I've never questioned it. When I started looking at the data, I said, I've never questioned it. I've never said, why didn't you make me part of the audit committee? Why didn't you? I've never asked for it because it's never been in my consciousness. So I think if I were to again be a member of a board, I will ask, why are you only making me an NRC head? Why are you only putting me in a CSR? So partly I think we also become blind to what is happening, and we just assume this is status quo. The first board I joined, I thought this is what it happens. I mean, this is how it is supposed to be. And so I think it's important. When I looked at my own data, I was like, wow, I never asked this question. And so Shalini, very rightly, that it is, these numbers are alarming, but it's also because we sometimes don't ask, and we don't even know that it is okay for us to ask.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask you a question about your experience as an independent director, and you answered that really. Rajeshwari, like to ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unmute yourself, Rajeshwari.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Wonderful, ma'am. Just wanted to ask, or rather share, that, on one of the boards, because I did ask the question, and I did made a point that please make me a part of the audit committee or a finance committee. And there I started asking uncomfortable questions. So, there was a subtle kind of a warning to say that you better be in, so and so committee, rather than, be in this kind of committees where you really do not matter. And I had to resign on that if I don't have a voice, it's better that I resign and go.
Right.
So yeah, just wanted to say that if you are an aggressive leader and if you make any uncomfortable questions, people really do not even like to hear you or listen to you, that what it is.
Yeah, and I think this is even more so because we are a minority. If there were 4 women, they can't ask everyone to resign, right? But I think because we are in minority, that it becomes easier in that sense. So I think we do need more women on the board. Just, and that'll change some of the dynamics, I think.
So that will require change in the Companies Act again. If you want to go and move that and increase it.
Yeah.
30%, 50% actually.
Yeah.
We should demand that.
We should. I think the government should just become a little more bold and say, we'll have a bolder mandate.
Yeah.
But just to come back to that point, Preeti, from what you've said, etc., you do believe that mandates will make a difference.
Yes.
I'm a little skeptical about it, and I just feel that there should be adequate, cultural change. I just worry about mandates. I mean, that's maybe more a personal view. I
Yes.
feel mandates err on the side of being, forced upon people, and therefore your heart is not in it. The organization's heart is not in it. So I just thought I'll lay that on the table because it could be a contrarian view, but
No, that's true, and I would make the same argument. But the more I look at the world data,
yeah.
I can see that sometimes change is so slow. I think there is a McKinsey study which says that if we just allowed time to take the change, it will take 254 years for us to have the kind of numbers we have. So if we are willing to wait for 254 years, we're okay. But I think we just can't. Is the whole thing. So that is why we need a little bit more push.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it will seem abnormal, but eventually it will become part of the story.
Yeah.
The narrative that we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
A change in the narrative. Any more questions?
I think there's one more from Jyoti in the chat group which says UCO Bank, BHEL don't have women representatives. So I presume the mandate is such that there are still companies which have not yet adhered to it, Professor?
It's an interesting part of the data. So when I finished my study in, I think I last did my data in December 2019. Yeah, there were 17 companies that did not have a woman director. So they were paying a fine and they did not have a woman director. And what was interesting was I wanted to put that list in my study as an appendix. So FICCI got back to me and said, please don't put this list because, maybe these people are members of our association. So it's okay. We understand that you feel strongly about it, but please don't put the list. So it is true that there are some companies who, even after they have been asked to, they don't necessarily put down, the numbers. So that's also a reality. That's also
they pay a fine and they pay a fine.
I
They
think
pay a fine.
many of these companies have been punished and all, some of them reprimanded by the regulator SEBI.
Yes. Yes.
So there's a penal provision also under the Companies Act.
There is.
Even with all that, maybe for the reasons you know better, and maybe as an
And they know
oversight of
better.
being too casual about it, and Companies Act has been, kind of taken for granted. So punishments are there, but
Yes.
again, FICCI requesting to remove the list and all that sounds, I don't know.
The public image is what they're bothered about. So if after the fine they will take, no, won't they not take them? after paying the
Well,
fine?
they will maybe they're just too slow. I think a lot of companies have very
Oh.
slow processes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes it's not because they don't want it, but they just don't process it fast enough to make it to the mandate, make it to the deadline. So hopefully they will.
Oh. Any other questions? Oh, it's been a wonderful talk, but any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, ma'am, can I take it
Yes.
over?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Nirmala. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, as said, we need more women in the board, and let's push. And it was brilliant, brilliant presentation, ma'am. You started from Spain mandate and then into France, Italy, and various countries, and narrowed down to India. And you also mentioned in one of the slides about the analyze, describe, and understand women are not more or less than men. And just really shocking also to know the figure. And Shailaja ma'am said it's a brilliant wake-up call. And all the conversations, interaction has made it very, very colorful. And thank you very much for this interesting data. And it is indeed a well-researched and highly informative and enriching lecture, which will encourage professional women to take up the role of directors in various boards. This has been an eye-opener for me as well, as I am a certified independent director. Thank you very much, ma'am. We, KMA, is pleased to present a token of appreciation for your speech on tokenism. Bridget? Yeah, this is a specially curated memento, hot from the oven, that will be couriered to you shortly.
So much. That's
So
lovely.
as Madhav would say, that is not virtual, Professor. That is a physical one that will come to you by courier.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Now on screen, later by courier to you.
Courier, yeah.
Physical
Thank
delivery.
you so much. Thank you.
Shalini ma'am, you are par excellent as the official navigator of the program. Thank you, Dr. Shalini ma'am. You are beautifully introduced and summed it up the program. Thank you very much. And all members kindly pay attention to our next program, topic technology as business enabler with focus on finance management by Mr. V. Ramakrishnan. He is the Chief Financial Officer, Tata Consultancy Services, on 13th April, 6 p.m. It is a highly relevant topic today, and the speaker is an expert in this field. Please mark your calendar and join us. Now, I invite Mr. Jomon K. George, our Honorary Secretary, to propose the vote of thanks.
Formal vote of thanks. You have thanked everyone sufficiently. Thank you, Senior Vice President Nirmala Lilly, very, very learned speaker of this evening, Professor Niharika Vora, Shalini Madam, our chair of the Women Managers Forum, Shailaja Menon, who did that wonderful introduction and coordinated the questions and seamlessly carried the program through. Other members who are with us on screen, off screen, and of course on YouTube, so many of them. So had a great evening, new insights, absolutely. As I say, wake up call. So the question is, who is sleeping? So everyone who's sleeping has to, and some of them are in deep slumber, not just sleeping, so they all have to wake up. So let me first salute Madam Professor Niharika Vora for that deep drill of research that you have done. I was about to say, digging the lonely burrow of research, but then towards the end, you were magnanimous enough, typical of a wonderful leader. Expected of an academician like you to have shown your research team, all young, smart boys and girls.
Yes.
So that's really nice. So excellent teamwork, and I'm sure one of the best collecting statistics from across the globe, and why this is the situation prevails. And in spite of having, as Madam Shalini Varia said, having a very clear mandate, even mandates are not being respected. So even with, take for example, CSR, which the Companies Act 2013 made mandatory, but now even with that, there are companies shamelessly mentioning in the board's report that we are just looking for appropriate avenues spending CSR, while it is just in front of the eye that there are eligible projects just ahead of you, so in front of you. So a lot of things to happen. So a wonderful session, and I'm strongly of the opinion, agree with the speakers, my lady colleagues, every one of you, that corporates will do well, and it makes sense for every one of them if they can leverage more on the capabilities of empowered women who are there. And one point of not here for the lady qualified and capable ladies here on screen is that there is an exam of which you have to qualify to become independent directors. So seriously look at it, and sure there are a lot of companies who would need the services, and I'm sure that it will be good for the corporates, not for tokenism, for the real value addition that every one of you can bring into the deliberations. Why only deliberations? Debates, fights in the boardroom, cutting each other and cutting through issues, whether it's a risk management committee or an audit committee. We are part of many audit committees where we see that that kind of intellectual deliberation has to really happen, and inputs from the side of the empowered women are really, really useful. So thank Madam Shalini Boyer again. Some interesting statistics before I conclude. We both are chartered accountants. Madam is ED. I am practicing chartered accountant. So today, 27% of the membership are chartered accountants, but strikingly, 43% of the students are girls. So therefore, that's quite encouraging. And what we call it is male bastions have already been kind of invaded and taken over by capable young. The most striking thing which I found was that the disengagement that's happening, that is from employment and all those things, that's really striking, disturbing. So anyway, that let's all wake up to the reality, and these insights gained would help us to have a fresh perspective as we go forward in our life as academicians, corporate heads like Shalini ma'am, consultants like me, every one of us. So thank you, Professor Neriga Bora, for being with us this evening, and
Thank you.
for sharing that wonderful piece of research that you had done. Very, very relevant to the topic. And to Madam Charlie Warrior, she doesn't make mistakes. All the 4 programs, we had the best-in-class speakers, and topics are very carefully chosen. I would say that curated topics, I can say. That is a term which has become very so, became so wonderful for every one of you. And Senior Vice President Nirmala Lilly, who stood in or sat in for the president today, is slightly indisposed after his vaccination. I had spoken to him this evening. So thank you everyone for being with us this evening. To the Secretariat, Jojo was also little, our ED was also little indisposed, but I think he was there often on the screen. Prajit, the entire secretarial team. Wonderful evening. So COVID is not gone, as we always say. Stay safe, stay focused, but stay relevant and determined. God bless everyone. Thank you.
Wonderful.